All right, guys, welcome back to Seneca's Letters to Lucilius. We are on, what letter are we on today? We are on letter 64. This is actually the end of the first section, as they've got it divided here, and it is on the first cause. So let's go ahead and jump right into this here and see what Seneca has to say. He starts off by saying, I shared my time yesterday with ill health. It claimed for itself all the period before noon. In the afternoon, however, it yielded to me, and so I first tested my spirit by reading then, when reading was found to be possible. I dared to make more demands upon the spirit, or perhaps I should say, to make more concessions to it. I wrote a little, and indeed with more concentration than usual, for I am struggling with a difficult subject and do not wish to be downed. In the midst of this, some friends visited me with the purpose of employing force and restraining me, as if I were a sick man indulging in some excess. So conversation was substituted for writing, and from this conversation I shall communicate to you the topic which is still the subject of debate, for we have appointed you referee. You have more of a task on your hands than you suppose, for the argument is threefold. All right, so breaking this down a little bit here, Seneca was not feeling good. He was feeling somewhat sick. So finally he felt a little bit better. So he started reading, and then he started writing, and some friends came over and basically were like, hey, you got to take it easy. But they ended up getting into discussion. Now he's asking Lucilius to be the referee of this discussion. What do you think about this? So let's see what the discussion is about. He says, our Stoic philosophers, as you know, declare that there are two things in the universe, which are the source of everything, namely, cause and matter. Matter lies sluggish, a substance ready for any use, but sure to remain unemployed if no one sets it in motion. Cause, however, by which we mean reason, molds matter and turns it into whatever direction it will, producing thereby various concrete results. Accordingly, there must be, in the case of each thing, that from which it is made, and next, an agent by which it is made. The former is the material, the latter is the cause. Okay, so we're talking about some basic stuff here, cause and effect, right? Now he's saying that this is what the idea is that you have matter and you have things that are causes, okay? And matter, it doesn't do anything unless there's a cause, okay? And so cause is the thing that molds matter. And so he's saying here that there must be, in the case of each thing, that from which it is made, and next an agent by which it is, or there must be, in the case of each thing, that from which it is made, and next an agent by which it is made, right? The former is its material, the latter is its cause. So the agent by which it's made is the cause, and then what it's made from, or that from which it's made is the material. It's made from something, and there's something that causes it to be made. Pretty simple here. Okay. Nothing really revolutionary here. So, all art is but imitation of nature. Therefore, let me apply these statements of general principles to the things which have to be made by man. A statue, for example, has afforded matter which was to undergo treatment at the hands of the artist, and has had an artist who was to give form to the matter. Hence, the case of the statue, the material was bronze, the cause was the workman, and so it goes with all things. They consist of that which is made and of the maker. Okay, so he's making the argument here that, look here, if you have a statue, all right, it's made of bronze, okay, and it was caused to be made by the maker, the artist. So there, that it fits that theory. Verse 4, he says, the Stoics believe in one cause only, the maker. But Aristotle thinks that the word cause can be used in three ways. The first cause, he says, is the actual matter without which nothing can be created. The second is the workman. The third is the form which is impressed upon every work. A statue, for example, this last is what Aristotle calls eidos. Okay, there is, too, says he, a fourth, the purpose of the work as a whole. Okay, so he's going back to Aristotle, right? And this is where things get a little bit more complicated, right? In what Aristotle believed, right? Because the Stoics have a more simpler belief. But essentially, what this means is he's saying that, okay, Aristotle says this, all right? There is cause is, first of all, there's a first cause, okay, which is the actual matter without which nothing can be. So the actual matter itself is the first cause. There's no pre-cause to that. So things just are. There had to be some kind of matter that existed, right? Which is kind of interesting because if we look at Big Bang and the universe and all this stuff, right? Like something had to come from somewhere. So there's this first cause, right? Okay, and then he's saying here that the second cause, okay, is the workman. Okay, so the person who actually shaped it. Okay, the third is the form, which is impressed upon the work. So how did the workman get the idea to make this thing? How did the artist make this thing or shape it? He had to have some kind of form. He had this, Aristotle believes in these kind of universal forms of things that exist sort of outside this world that exist on their own. Okay, which is it's impressed upon the work, and then he's saying that there's a fourth one, and it's the purpose. Like, why did this work get created? So that this is all part of the cause. Okay. Now I shall show you what the last means. Bronze is the first cause of the statue, for it could never have been made unless the thing had been something from which it could be cast and molded. Okay. The second cause is the artist, for without the skilled hands of the workman, that bronze could have not been shaped into the outlines of the statue. The third cause is the form, inasmuch as our statue could never be called the lance bearer or the boy binding his hair, had not this special shape been stamped upon it. The fourth cause is the purpose of his work. For if this purpose had not existed, the statue would not have been made. Okay, so he's making a pretty good argument, kind of what we just said, that you kind of need all of these things, otherwise the statue doesn't come into being. Which makes some pretty good sense here. All right. And in verse 6, he says, now what is this purpose? Is it that which attracted the artist, which he followed when he made the statue? It may have been money, if he had made it for sale or renown. If he had worked for reputation or religion, or if he has wrought it as a gift for the temple. Therefore, this also is a cause contributing towards the making of the statue? Or do you think that we should avoid including among the causes of a thing which has been made that element without the thing, without which the thing in question would not have been made? Okay, so this is the real question he's asking. He's saying, okay, this is the fourth cause, right? Which is that the purpose or the reason for making it. And so he's saying, is that important? Is it important? Is that something that had to exist? Right. And he's making the argument saying, hey, if he didn't want to make some money, if he didn't want to create a gift for the temple, if he didn't want to make a name for himself, he wouldn't have created the work. So it wouldn't have happened. To these four, Plato adds a fifth cause, the pattern, which he himself calls the idea. For it is this that the artist gazed upon when he created the work which had decided to carry out. Now, it makes no difference whether he had his pattern outside himself, that he may direct his glance to it, or within himself, conceived and placed there by himself. God has within himself these patterns of all things, and his mind comprehends the harmonies and the measures of the whole totality of things which are to be carried out. He is filled with these shapes which Plato calls the ideas, imperishable, unchangeable, not subject to decay, and therefore, though men die, humanity itself, or the idea of man, according to which man is molded, lasts on, and though men toil and perish, it suffers no change. Okay, so he's saying here that Plato, okay, if you remember Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, okay, so Plato, the successor, Plato had this fifth cause. Let's just put it that way, okay? So Plato said that it's the idea. So where did someone get the pattern for this from? Did they look at a man and then make a statue of him? Did they have this in their mind? Either way, it doesn't matter. But it had to be, it had to have some kind of shape, some kind of idea in his mind before he created the thing. Okay, that's the argument here. All right, so let's move on here. And he says in verse 8, accordingly, there are 5 causes, as Plato says: the material, the agent, the makeup, the model, and the end in view. Last comes the result of all these, just as in the case of the statue. To go back to the figure with which we began, the material is bronze, the agent is the artist, the makeup is the form which is adapted to the material, the model is a pattern imitated by the agent, and The end in view is the purpose in the maker's mind. And finally, the result of all these is the statue itself. Okay, so he's just putting together all the things that we've talked about and giving them the names, right? So the result is the statue. Okay. In verse 9, he says, the universe also, in Plato's opinion, possesses all these elements. The agent is God, the source, the matter, the form, the shape, and the arrangement of the visible world. The pattern is doubtless the model according to which God has made this great and most beautiful creation. Okay, so now he's relating it to God. And he's saying, and to the universe. And saying, okay, well, the universe also came about from a maker, which is God. Okay. In verse 10, he says, the purpose is his object. In so doing, do you ask what God's purpose is? It is goodness. Plato, at any rate, says, what was God's reason for creating the world? God is good, and no good person is grudging of anything that is good. Therefore, God made it the best world possible. Hand down your opinion, then, O judge. State who seems to you to say what is truest, and not who says what is absolutely true. For to do that is as far beyond our ken as truth itself. Okay, so here's some kind of insight from this, which is to say that according to this, and if you just think this out logically, God is good. God created the universe, the world for goodness. So it must be as perfect as it could possibly be, because it would be ridiculous for a perfect God that is good to create something that is bad. It doesn't make any sense, right? He says here that what was God's reasoning for creating the world? God is good, and no good person is grudging of anything that is good. Therefore, God made it the best world possible. So it's interesting to think of this world as the best world possible, because a lot of times we tend to think the opposite. Now, it's easy to do that when things aren't going your way, but if you really understand what's going on, like there's this universal truth that this is the best world possible. This is how it should be. And this is one of the key Stoic beliefs is that amor fati, right? The love of fate, to say that I don't wish it to be anything other than what it is. And if you start living your life that way, you'll find a lot more contentment and happiness in your life, because it is always the striving for something other than what is. It is the denial of reality. It is the non-acceptance of reality that causes us the most harm and the most pain in life. And that's what Stoics are trying to teach us, is to stop doing that, to just accept what is, to consider it to be perfect, to not want it any other way. In verse 11, he says, the throng of causes defined by Aristotle and by Plato embraces either too much or too little, for they regard as causes of an object that is to be made everything without which the object cannot be made, and have named too few. Time must be included among the causes, for nothing can be made without time. They must also include place, for if there is no place where the thing can be made, it will not be made. And motion too. Nothing is either made or destroyed without motion. There is no art without motion, no change of any kind. Okay, so he's adding a few more things here, right? Time, motion, all right, a place, right? Those are essentials, okay? Now, however, I am searching for the first, the general cause. This must be simple, inasmuch as matter too is simple. Do we ask, what cause is? Is it surely creative reason? In other words, God? For those elements to which you referred are not a great series of independent causes. They all hinge on one alone, and that will be the creative cause. So now he's looking back to see, okay, well, what is the first cause? Where do things essentially come from? Is it creative reason? Essentially, is it God? Is it that God has instilled this upon you as a person, and then you become the artist because of this, right? That's sort of what he's asking here. Do you maintain that form is a cause? That this is only what the artist stamps upon his work. It is part of a cause, but not the cause. Neither is the pattern a cause, but an indispensable tool of the cause. His pattern is an indispensable to the artist as the chisel or the file. Without these, art can make no progress. But for all that, these things are neither parts of the art nor the cause of it. Okay, so he's saying here that, look, the form can't be the cause. Not the full cause, not the first cause, okay? And it's just kind of what the artist is stamping upon. It's just a shape that he's creating, and neither can be the pattern, because the pattern, as we recall, is what the artist has seen or what he has in his mind that he's producing. But it's like a tool. It's like a guide. It's not the actual art itself. So he says then in 14, then perhaps you'll say the purpose of the artist, that which leads him to undertake to create something, is the cause. It may be a cause, it is not, however, the efficient cause, but only an accessory cause. But there are countless accessory causes. What we are discussing is a general cause. Now, the statement of Plato and Aristotle is not in accord with the usual penetration when they maintain that the whole universe, the perfectly wrought work, is a cause. For there is a great difference between a work and the cause of the work. Okay, so it gets a little bit technical here, but he's saying that, okay, you can't even say the purpose of the artist is the cause. Okay, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, because it leads him to undertake it, but it's really not the cause, because we're looking for a general cause here. Okay, and he says that, these statements that Aristotle and Plato made, they're not the usual depth. Okay, and the reason why is he says that when they maintain that the whole universe is perfectly wrought, that the whole universe is a cause. That's not it. It's still, he's saying there has to be more depth to it than this. Okay, in verse 15 he says, either give your opinion, or, as easier in the cases of this kind, declare that the matter is not clear and call for another hearing. But you will reply, what pleasure do you get from wasting your time on these problems which relieve you of none of your emotions, rout none of your desires? So far as I'm concerned, I treat and discuss them as matters which contribute greatly towards calming the spirit, and I search myself first and then the world about me. Okay, so this is where he's submitting this question to Lucilius, and he's saying, okay, well, your objection is going to be like, why are you worrying about this, Seneca? It's not going to help you with Stoic philosophy. It's not going to quiet your soul. It's not going to do anything. It's not going to help you relieve your emotions. And Seneca's saying, well, here it calms my spirit. If I can't figure this out, I search within myself, and then I search without. I kind of want to know the answer. I'm curious. That's what he's saying. Okay. And not even now am I, as you think, wasting time for all these questions, provided that they be not chopped up and torn apart into such unprofitable refinements, elevate and lighten the soul, which is weighed down by a heavy burden and desires to be freed and return to the elements which it was once a part. For this body of ours is a weight upon the soul and its penance. As the load presses down, the soul is crushed and is in bondage, unless philosophy has come to its assistance and has bid it take fresh courage by contemplating the universe, and has turned it from things earthly to things divine. There it has liberty. There it can roam abroad. Meantime, it escapes the custody in which it is bound and renews its life in heaven. Okay, so Seneca's making the case here. He's saying, look, when it's my spirit, it weighs heavy on me, but when I look at these philosophical things, when I explore these things, my soul is freed, because it can. This is what we're supposed to do, is just to ponder the universe, to think about these things. And I think there's some truth to this. I think that sometimes we can take the world for granted and the universe and everything for granted. And it's really, when we really start to really think about it, it's kind of an exercise, right? If you really want to expand your creative thought and you really want to become good at philosophy, you got to start asking questions. You got to start thinking about things, not just taking it for granted. Because that's how you really come up with your own philosophies for life and really start to understand things. And yeah, this might be kind of a silly question, or it might not pertain to anything. Who cares what the answer to this question is? But it's that pattern of thought that you have to train yourself in. And I think that's what Seneca is really getting at here. Okay. He says in verse 17, just as skilled workmen who have been engaged upon some delicate piece of work which wearies their eyes with straining, if the light which they have, we'll skip that word just for YouTube here, okay, have blank or uncertain, go forth into the open air, and in some park devoted to people's recreation, delight in their eyes in the generous light of day, so the soul, imprisoned as it has been in this gloomy and darkened house, seeks the open sky whenever it can, and in the contemplating of the universe finds rest. Okay, so he's drawing an analogy here, all right? And he's just saying, Look, if you're a skilled worker, okay, and you're on some delicate piece of work, okay, which just uses your eyes, okay, and you strain your eyes, all right, and then you go into the air and you get some light, and you see it, it's refreshing. It's like now it sort of lights you up. Now you're kind of free again. You can find this rest. Like you have to, if you ever worked on something for a very long time, and then you get out into the sun and you're like, oh, okay, that's what he's saying here. Okay. The wise man, the seeker after wisdom, is bound closely indeed to his body, but he is an absentee so far as his better self is concerned, and he concentrates his thoughts upon lofty things. Bound, so to speak, to his oath of allegiance, he regards the period of life as his term of service. He is so trained that neither loves nor hates life. He endures a mortal lot, although he knows that an ampler lot is in store for him. Okay, so here's some wisdom here. He's talking about the wise man, right? The wise man is always the Stoic, okay? The seeker of wisdom. So he's bound to his body, right? But he's not really there, not his better self, okay? He concentrates his thoughts on things beyond just him, beyond his body and his basic living, okay? All right? He thinks of life as neither something good or neither something bad. He doesn't love it. He doesn't hate it. It's just something that he endures, his mortal lot, knowing that there's something greater beyond this, right? So, again, in a lot of Seneca's passages, we're seeing that he does believe there is a life beyond this life, right? This is something that he is sort of resting upon, right? In 19, he says, "Do you forbid me to contemplate the universe? Do you compel me to withdraw from the whole and restrict me to a part? May I not ask, what are the beginnings of all things? Who molded the universe? Who took the confused and conglomerate mass of sluggish matter and separated it into its parts? May I not inquire who is the master builder of this universe? How the mighty bulk was brought under control of law and order? Who gathered together the scattered atoms? Who separated the disordered elements and assigned an outward form to elements that lay in one vast shapelessness? Or whence came all the expanse of light? And whether it is fire or something even brighter than fire?" Okay, so he's asking some questions we should be asking, right? Are you just taking this for granted now, like that the universe was created? At some point you have to contemplate some of the bigger things in life, right? There must be some creator. There must be some creative force, whether you call it the universe or God or however you believe upon that. And Seneca recognized this. And he said, shouldn't we contemplate these things? I mean, this is kind of fantastic. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy that we don't think more about this. It's kind of crazy that we just live our lives and take things for granted, and we don't realize that somehow someone created all this stuff. Like it's disobeying the law of entropy. What's going on here, right? There must be something. Like there must be some explanation, right? What's interesting about this personally is that I find that no matter how far you go back, there's some mystical explanation for everything, right? Because if you say Big Bang or whatever, I'm familiar with, with all the science behind that. But what happened before that dot exploded, and why did that dot explode? Like there's a billion questions you could ask about that. You can't just say, okay, Big Bang, I understand it. That's no. Whether there's a God, then you would have to say, well, who created God and how did God, he's eternal. Okay, but what happened before this event? What happened before there's a billion questions to ask that are unanswerable, honestly. Like it is impossible for the universe to make sense. Am I not to ask these questions? Must I be ignorant of the heights whence I have descended? Whether I am to see this world but once or to be born many times? What is my destination afterwards? What abode waits my soul in its release from the laws of slavery among man? Do you forbid me to have a share in heaven? In other words, do you bid me live with my head bowed down? So he's contemplating things like reincarnation. Interesting, right? These questions are out there. And Seneca's asking these questions. And he's saying we should be asking these questions. No, I'm above such existence. I was born to a greater destiny than to be a mere chattel of my body. And I regard this body as nothing but a chain which manacles my freedom. Therefore, I offer it as a sort of buffer to fortune and shall allow no wound to penetrate through to my soul, for my body is the only part of me which can suffer injury. In this dwelling, which is exposed to peril, my soul lives free. So this is an interesting way to think about things, right? And does it require a belief in a higher cause to really be a Stoic? It's a good question, because can you really disregard the body if you don't believe that there's something greater, if you don't believe there's a soul underneath? I don't know. I don't know. If the body is all that there is, then maybe you should be a little bit more concerned with fortune, with fate, maybe. I don't know. I mean, to some degree, I'm playing the devil's advocate, because we know that it's not going to benefit you much to worry about the things that you can't control. However, what he's saying here is he's saying, like, look, there's this greater, like, I'm going to consider my body to be, something that I am chained to. It is preventing me from being free. And so I'm not going to allow the things that happen. Only my body can suffer injury. That's it. Not my soul. And I'm not going to allow these things to penetrate through to my soul. I'm not going to take them so seriously. I'm going to let the fortune do to the body what it will. Never shall this flesh drive me to feel fear or to assume any pretense that is unworthy of a good man. Never shall I lie in order to honor this petty body. When it seems proper, I shall sever my connection with it. At present, while we are bound together, our alliance shall nevertheless not be one of equality. The soul shall bring all quarrels before its own tribunal. To despise our bodies is sure freedom. So again, more on this idea that I'm not going to allow the body, the flesh, to drive me into fear. Right? I'm not going to allow that, because I know that there's something greater. There's my soul. And whatever issues my soul has, it has its own tribunal. Okay? And he's saying to despise our bodies is sure freedom. What does it mean to despise? Right? We use this word a lot in Stoic philosophy. Despise means to not be affected by, not to be attached to, right? To not require, right? So we despise our body, just like we despise death. It means we're not afraid of it. It means that we don't attach to it. So in verse 23, he says, to return to the subject, this freedom will be greatly helped by the contemplation of which we were just speaking. All things are made up of matter and of God. God controls matter, which encompasses him and follows him as its guide and leader. And that which creates, in other words, God, is more powerful and precious than matter, which is acted upon by God. Okay, so he's relating it back to God. All right. And he's saying that, God is the master of all the matter, and the matter conforms to God's will. And then he says here, God's place in the universe corresponds to the soul's relation to man. World matter corresponds to our mortal body. Therefore, let the lower serve the higher. Let us be brave in the face of hazards. Let us not fear wrongs or wounds or bonds or poverty. And what is death? It is either the end or a process of change. I have no fear of ceasing to exist. It is the same as not having begun. Nor do I shrink from changing into another state, because I shall, under no conditions, be as cramped as I am now. Farewell. So, some heavy stuff here. Some heavy contemplations here. And the thing to understand here that might be a little confusing is this first part where it says, God's place in the universe corresponds to the soul's relation to man. So, he's saying that your soul is kind of like God, like in relation to you. Okay, so world matter corresponds to our mortal body. So we've got God creating the universe and his relation to the universe, to matter, right? That it is. What did he say before? God is the master of the matter; it conforms to his will. And then he's saying that your soul is kind of like God to your body, and your body would essentially conform to your will. You're the master of your body, right? And so he said, therefore, let the lower serve the higher. So let your body serve the soul, not the other way around. So don't be controlled by the flesh, you could say. All right? That's why he's saying, be brave in the face of hazards. Let us not fear wrongs or wounds or bonds or poverty or even death. Right? And again, he says, look, if I die, either that's the end, and I'm not afraid to not exist. It's as if I had never existed. There's no difference, which, again, I could argue the case that I guess when it happens, it doesn't matter, but the idea of that is somewhat scary, at least to me. But he says, otherwise I change, and if I change, I'm going to be in a better, less cramped place than I am now in this mortal body. So, anyway, this was a bit of a heavy letter. It's there's a lot to digest here. It's not as heavy on what I would say is the Stoic philosophy. You know, so some of these letters as we've gone on are not espousing as much of the principles that some of the earlier ones are, but they're still useful. It's still valuable information. So, anyway, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Take care.